Okay, good morning, everyone. I hope I'm audible and the slides are visible too. Okay, so good morning and welcome once again to yet another course. Ajinkya, everything okay?
Good morning, ma'am.
Yeah, good morning, good morning. All right. Okay, so if I'm audible and the slides are visible, we'll continue. All right. So today we are meeting for this course called Management Essentials. I understand that a lot of you may not, have done a lot of management courses before, or you might feel a little apprehensive about what this entire program holds in store for you. So first things first, we thought it was important for you to gain some, essential, what do you say? Base, okay, into what is management. Okay, so once that is clear with you, then obviously all other courses and deeper courses, those which require more of application of management, will also come in play. Okay, so this is not going to be, such a herculean task for you. It's a simple course which will require you to understand management, especially if you're not from a commerce or any other background. Then it might be a total different or new knowledge for you to understand how management works, how it's important today, and what are some of the essentials, okay, in terms of skill, essentials in terms of knowledge that you need to possess in order to carry out this function of management successfully. Okay, so with that having said, let me just move into what does this particular course have in store for you today. Okay, is the session objectives visible to you?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, perfect. If at any point of time you feel that the slides are not moving forward or there's a problem, please feel free to unmute and let me know. Okay, if not, we will continue with the session, and towards the end of the session, I will be giving you 5-10 minutes to solve your questions. Please note down your questions and keep them aside. They will all be answered before the end of the session. All right. It's a humble request not to raise your hands or not to unmute through the session to ask a doubt. Okay, we will answer all the doubts at the end. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so session objectives: by the end of this session, you will be able to develop a strong base in management theories. You'll understand the role of business in the economy. How does business really work? Why is it important to the economy? Okay, to better understand the mechanics of trade and commerce, to gain some knowledge into the skills in business and business management, and of course, to be enlightened about the current and futuristic aspects of management. Okay, so I know that all of these, they start off a little with a theoretical base, and later on, as you progress in the course, you will be studying more concrete, more application based stuff also in this particular paper. Okay, so let us start with understanding what is management and how does it work. Okay, management is the act of getting people together, okay, to accomplish desired goals and objectives using available resources efficiently and effectively. Okay, now I'm sure that a lot of you, even if you've not studied management, you must have heard this word very often. Okay, let's manage our particular work, or let's manage time, let's manage stress, let's manage our work and tasks that we have at hand. So manage itself means how can you effectively and efficiently complete or handle something, is known as being able to manage something. Now, when you speak of management in terms of a company or in terms of a business organization, then for them, it is the act of getting people together. So you must have seen that in businesses, the way people are able to work or achieve their objectives is basically by bringing together people of different genres, people who have different skill sets, different knowledge bases, different specialities and specializations, different levels of training. These people are brought together. And why are they brought together? So that they can work collectively in order to work towards accomplishment of organizational goals and objectives. Okay, so every company, every business house, when it is established, starts off with a very lofty vision, okay, saying that either, let's say if it's a pharmaceutical organization, you have, let us say, a vision that you want to become the pharmaceutical leader in the market, or you want to become a pan Asia supplier of pharmaceuticals, or you want to become the or you want to be counted or known as one of the top 5 pharmaceutical organizations globally. So you start off with a very, very tall vision or a lofty vision for your company. And while that itself looks pretty bleak and you don't know when you're going to achieve that, in order to reach out to that particular goal, you will need to fix up intermittent objectives, milestones, right? And you'll have to say, okay, if I'm looking at in the next 25 years, I want to become a global leader in pharmaceuticals, while I have just a small startup today, or I have just a, I would say a small scale pharmaceutical organization is what I'm running today. So then we'll say, okay, now how are you going to reach out to that vision? It looks really huge and unattainable at this point in time. So can you just break it down for me into smaller, understandable chunks? So then the management will say, okay, now that that's my goal for the 25th year or in 25 years from now, let me break it down into 5 yearly goals. Okay, so we'll say, okay, in 5 years, I want to become a top pharmaceutical manufacturer or supplier, at least in my state. Okay, or in my district, I want to become the topmost. Okay, in 10 years time, in my entire region, I want to become a global, or I want to become a leader in pharmaceutical management or pharmaceutical supplies. Okay, in 15 years from now, I want to ensure that in my country, I'm a leading supplier. Okay, so in 15 years time, I should be able to supply domestically to every state and region, and I should have a major part of market share. Most of the consumers who are buying pharmaceutical products should be trying to buy my company or my brand only. So that is my 15-year goal. Okay, then let us say in 20 years, I want to become a top supplier and manufacturer of pharmaceuticals in entire Asia. So now you want to go out of the country. You want to start looking out for markets, let us say in Indonesia and the UAE and Malaysia and Singapore and all of the Eastern countries. And you'll say, okay, now I think I have accomplished the Asian market too. Right? And now that has been achieved in 20 years. Now in the next 5 years, I want to ensure that I reach out of Asia and I'm going to become a global supplier of pharmaceuticals. And not just that, I want to be topping that particular rank as well. Okay, so this is how you have to break down your entire long-term goals into smaller objectives. Okay, and the reason why you need to do this, why do you have to have a concerted effort of so many people coming together and all of them working towards the organizational goal, and all of them require to work efficiently and effectively towards this? One major reason is there is always a scarcity of resources in the market. Okay, so what do you mean by resources? Everything that is input into business, or everything, all those components and elements that are required in order to take the company towards its goal, they are all called your resources. For example, I think you would have heard of human resources, right? This is a very common term you must have come across in your organizations or wherever. So human is also a resource. Without people, you can't achieve much. Right? So human resources, likewise, you have capital resources, which is nothing but the money that you need to invest in the company, or you have material resources, which can be either your raw material, etc. You could have fixed asset resources, which are basically your building or the machinery that you're using in your organization. So different kind of resources have to be pooled in, and then they should be used in the most optimal manner so that you're able to achieve your goal. Okay, some of your resources are in fact in the starting stages. In fact, most of your resources are in constrained supply, and therefore the need for you is to utilize them in the most efficient manner. Okay, try to ensure that you're able to get maximum output with the minimal input. That is what you mean by efficiency. Okay, so that is what is the meaning of management from the initial paragraph that we just read. Management involves functions of planning, organizing, staffing, leading, directing, or controlling an organization's resources. Okay, for the achievement of organizational goals. So basically, the idea is management is not a one-time task or an activity. It is actually a system. Okay, and this system will be successful only if the various functions within that system are in tandem. They are aligned so well and they are performed so well that in totality, management is going to be successful in achieving their goals. The nature of the business. Okay, now you've understood what is management, and management is a very essential thing to be taken care of in businesses. Okay, now since we are studying business administration, business management, it's important for us to understand what exactly is this business that we are talking about. Okay, so the nature of business is such that it requires, or it takes into account, human needs and wants. There is somewhere subconsciously this concept of value that will keep repeating in your mind, that will keep coming up time and again as you are trying to apply business and management principles. You will have to broadly understand the role of business, not just in the lives of businessmen, but also in the lives of consumers like you and me who buy from these business houses, and also for the economy as a whole, the government and the tax authorities and all of that. Okay, and also we need to understand that business has a major role in business and economic development. Okay, economic development cannot happen in the absence of business. So business is quintessential. In fact, a lot of the country's progress depends on how businesses are flourishing within that country. Okay, and therefore it becomes all the more necessary. Okay, human needs. Okay, we understood that among the nature of business, the first thing that we'll have to understand is human needs. Okay, now origin of a business is because of a human need. Yes, do we all agree with this? Right? If as human beings, we did not have any needs and wants, and if we felt all our need is for air, which is freely available to us, we need water. 75% of the earth is made up of water, so there's plenty of water around. So if all my basic needs was air and water, then do you think business would have ever come up, the concept of business, or people would have set up businesses? No, that's because just air and water is not our need, right? We are not talking about survival anymore. We are talking about a lot of other things which will make our life comfortable, easy, worth living. And we have higher order needs also, right? We want esteem needs, we have status needs, we have, mental and emotional needs, safety requirements. So all of this will come to us only if business is able to succeed. Right, so human needs, if you have studied economics or read about it at any point of time, or people who have studied economics will be able to agree with me that there is a concept that human needs are unlimited, right? Which means that you feel that, okay, all I need is maybe a loaf of bread because I'm hungry. You buy that, and the minute you've eaten the first two slices and your hunger is sort of sufficient, you'll say, okay, now I wish I had a cup of juice or a cup of coffee to top up that bread. Right, and once that's done, and then after a couple of hours you'll say, okay, I had the bread, but I don't think I'm fully satisfied. I want a more, a broader lunch, or I want a more heavier quantity of lunch, because I think I'm starting to feel hungry again. So we are never going to be satisfied at any point in time saying that I think all my needs are done. Right, you always are aspiring for something more, something better, and once you feel all your basic necessities are enough, we'll start looking for higher things. Right, so let us say you have a house to live in, you have basic requirements of air, water, etc. Some basic appliances that you need in your kitchen for cooking and other things are there. Okay, basic comfort factors like you have an air conditioner at home or an air cooler is there at home, or you have, let us say you are going to a good school or a good educational center, so your educational needs also taken care of, which means all your basic needs are good. Are we now willing to settle down and say, okay, now I don't have anything more that I need for? No. Now, after 5 years, you'll say, no, but this house is not got everything that I want. I think I want to look for a villa. I want to look for a bungalow. I want to look for something bigger than this. Right? Then again, if you have a two-wheeler, you'll say, no, I think now it's high time we go for a four-wheeler. Two-wheeler, I think that need is now met, and now I want to go for a four-wheeler. Right? And after you buy a four-wheeler, then the race is never ending. Right? So you'll say, okay, now I've got a basic model. Now I want to go for a VXI. Then you'll say, I want to go for an SUV. Then you'll say, I want to go for a high-end BMW or an Audi or something like that. So human needs will never get satisfied. And thanks to that, business houses are able to set themselves and flourish, because business is basically here to take care of our human needs. And as long as human needs are there, as long as human needs will never be satisfied, businesses will continue to prosper. Correct? Business plays a vital role by providing us the opportunity to work, and also with products and services that lead to satisfaction of needs. Right? So it's helping us in both ways. Because there are business houses that are set up, we as consumers are able to get all kinds of products and services which we feel will make our life more comfortable, more luxurious. So you're able to get your hands on those products and services. And in order to manufacture those products and services, business houses will need people. They'll need human resources. They'll need labor. They'll need people with different kinds of skill sets. And that's how the people in the economy get their labor, get their jobs. So on the one hand, it's giving you a job. If you get a job, you're going to get a handsome salary. You're going to be paid well for that. Once you're paid well for that, then you can immediately change from the role of employee to the role of consumer and use that money that you're paid with to buy the products and services that you want. Okay, the work opportunities or the goods and services are provided through market mechanism. Right? So the work opportunities that you have or the goods and services that you want are provided through market mechanism. What is market mechanism? Market mechanism, the simple term that you can use for this is demand and supply. Right? As long as we consumers are going on demanding for more and better goods and services, till that time, business houses will go on trying to produce those kinds of goods and services and try to supply. Therefore, work opportunities will keep on coming up. People will keep getting jobs. As they keep getting jobs, they will start getting paid. Once they are paid, they have enough money in their hands. They can come and buy those goods and services, and the cycle goes on and on. Okay, market is a place where such goods and services are exchanged for value. Right? We just spoke about market mechanism. Therefore, we are speaking about what is market. The concept of value, right? This is also another important factor as far as business and its nature is concerned. Okay. See, the exchange of goods and services always happens by paying some value called a price. How often have you tried to go to a market and say, okay, I want to, let's say a kg of onions, or I want a kg of cucumber. And then you tell the shopkeeper, okay, you pay it, you give it to me, but I have nothing to pay you with. And how often have they let you go? Right? So unless you have paid up for those goods and services, business doesn't culminate. Right? It's about an exchange of goods and services. It's not about just manufacturing goods and services and pushing it off to the consumer saying you take it. Right? There's no free lunches in this world. Right? So when goods and services are manufactured, obviously we as consumers have to pay a price in order to enjoy those goods and services. Okay, and what we pay for purchasing these goods and services is called price. Right? And therefore, if you go to a supermarket to buy something, everything has a price tag on it. You go to buy vegetables or fruits, again, you will be informed by the vendor as to what is the price of, let's say a kg of apples or a kg of oranges or a kg of potatoes. You are given the price, and unless you pay them, you are not allowed to go away with the goods. That's how the system of price or value works. Value is decided based on need intensity, availability or scarcity of the product, and availability of funds to pay. Right? All these three factors have a good amount of bearing or an influence on what is the value or what is the price. Okay. Now, let me give you an example. Let us say, for example, it's an item as basic as, let's say, a hand sanitizer. right? Hand sanitizers were always there in the market. Okay, at least for the last 15, 20 years, there have been enough supply, let us say in medical stores or at the nearest chemist. They have been stocking hand sanitizers for like anything. But the point is that people who never felt the need to use it, people who had close proximity to tap, water, liquid soap, were happy just using that. And sanitizers were used by maybe a niche sector of the market who said that, okay, we will use sanitizers, and we call them the elite people, maybe, who tend to use sanitizers. But then what happened suddenly when there was a COVID strike in the economy, right? And suddenly we came to know that, okay, my God, there are millions of people who are infected with COVID, and the coronavirus is really dangerous, and the government had given you a narrative that every 20 minutes you need to wash your hands off with soap, and whenever you touch something you need to immediately sanitize your hands. What happened? The need intensity, the need for sanitizers suddenly shot up in the market. In fact, every individual had at least a small pouch of sanitizer with him. So tell me, in a population of India, like, where you have 130, 140 crore people, and every single person has a sanitizer, has the need gone up? Absolutely. From what was once a luxurious product, a product you never thought of is going to be bought in your house, is now like, coming in like a ration. Yeah? Sanitizer is getting over. Come on, let's buy the next pouch. Right? So need intensity. So when demand for those sanitizers go up, what happens? Price of sanitizers will go up, because they know that there are more and more people to buy, no matter if it is a 10 rupee pouch. If I make it 15 also tomorrow, still people will buy. So the value of price is based on need intensity, right? Similarly, if you look at, let us say, the price of vegetables, right? Once a year, you must have noticed the price of onions or tomatoes or potatoes shoot up, right? Suddenly there will be a scarcity in the market, saying that, okay, maybe we had a failed monsoon, or we had a bad crop and we didn't have enough, production of onions, and therefore we are not able to supply onions to the entire community. So there is a scarcity, where earlier we used to have, for example, let us say 100 kilos of onion that was produced. Right now we have only around 60 kgs of onions. So what has happened? 40% of onion production, or has gone down, or 40% of the onion crop has been destroyed by bad weather, monsoon, etc. And now the world, or India, has got only 60% of the onion for consumption. Now, if the availability is scarce, what happens? The price of the product will go up. Why? Because the number of people who need it are still the same. Demand is greater, supply is less. Whenever the demand is huge and supply is less, price will go up. Right? So what happens? Suddenly, the price of onion, which was 30 rupees, will now suddenly become 60 rupees. Right? And they see, when, okay, people are still demanding, then they'll make it 80 rupees. Why do they do that? They say, okay, and if you still need it, then you come and buy. Na? So what happens? Suddenly all the poor people, or people who feel that, okay, no, onion is not an essential commodity, let us do without onion. So what happens? They will stop buying, right? And those of them who really need it, let's say, for example, restaurants, hotels, right? They cannot do without onion, right? Because their entire business, their consumer base, everything is dependent on the taste of the food that they make, and they cannot make good food if they didn't have onions. So what they'll do, they will pay whatever the price in the market is. If it is 80 rupees, 100 rupees, whatever, they will start buying it, and they will still cook the food. But individual consumers like you and me will say, okay, now the price of onions have shot up, let us stop using onions in our food, let's look for substitutes, let's start cooking food which doesn't require onion much, right? So we will start thinking otherwise, but there will still be a good section of the people who will say, no, we will buy it at whatever price, because we can't do without it, right? So, and also about the availability of funds. Okay, let us say if your economy is undergoing what is known as inflation. Okay, inflation means it's characterized by lots of money supply. Everywhere there is money supply. But what happens if the money supply is too much? Prices of products will go up. Right? Why? Because if there's lots of money with people, they don't mind paying extra price and buying, right? So sellers will increase the price. But if you have a very pessimistic situation in the market, and let us say business is not doing well, people are not earning good salaries, what will happen? Employers will pay lesser to employees. They will start earning Instead of 100 rupees, they're going to earn only 50 rupees. Now, what happens? They are going to buy only basic bare minimum necessities and save the remaining funds. In that case, luxury items and items of comfort will not be sold very much. People will buy only their basic necessities and stop there. So how much funds you have in your hand also determine what is the value and what you will purchase. Okay. Today, money is a medium of exchange used as price, right? So whenever you go to a store and buy something, obviously you have to pay money. So whether you're going to pay in that hard, crisp currency notes that you have in your pockets, or whether you choose to pay in, pay via a mobile wallet, like let's say a GPay or a Paytm or whatever, or whether you are using plastic money like credit cards and debit cards, whatever it is, end of the day, the final settlement of all this happens through money only, right? Earlier, before money was invented and created, we used what is known as a barter system where goods were exchanged for goods. So if I had a kg of tomatoes and you had a kg of onions, and if we needed each other's product, we would just exchange it and say, okay, here's 1 kg onions which you need, and I need a kg of tomatoes which you can give me, and then we would just take each other's product and leave. Right? That was how the barter system used to work. But yes, there were a lot of difficulties that the barter system entailed. Like, for example, you have to have a product that you don't want, and the other person should have a product that you want. Only then can you successfully exchange your products. Then again, if you had large, bulky products which could not be broken down or divided, then buying smaller parts of another product used to be extremely difficult for you. So, a lot of things happened, due to which people started evolving out of the barter system, and then we had what was known as metallic money and all of that, and finally we have money in the way that we have it today. The role of business, right? What is the role of business today, considering the human needs are unlimited, considering that whenever you buy something you have to pay what is known as price? How does it? Okay, the basic function of business is to satisfy human wants. So a large part of your doubt about what does business do, why is it important, is answered over here. As long as human beings exist on the earth, we will continue to have needs, and our needs are unlimited. We will continue to have needs and higher order needs as long as we live. And in order to provide and satisfy all those needs, businesses have to function. Okay. Business activity involves production and distribution of goods and services. Such activities are classified into business and non-business. Okay. So business activity has production and distribution of goods and services. Right. You all agree with me that sometimes I need to produce something. I need to have a factory. I need to have machinery. I need to have people who will painstakingly work at some material, and then they will process it, and then they will sell it, right? So this is known as production and distribution of goods and services. Okay. Now, all these activities can be classified as business and non-business activities. Non-business, where they don't involve much of the concept of value or the exchange of price and so on and so forth. They are non-business activities. Typically, the paid activities were called business activities, and activities that are not paid for are called non-business activities. Okay, so obviously today, I don't think there's anything really that you get free, right? But certain times, let's say, for example, the air you breathe, you say is free, right? There's plenty of it around us, right? We don't have to get up or wake up in the morning thinking that, oh my God, today, how am I going to breathe? Where is the oxygen? It's there around you, you breathe and get away. But let's say if you're really sick and you're unable to breathe, and then you're put into a hospital. Now there, if they have to supply you through an oxygen cylinder, that doesn't come free, right? That is something you have to pay for. So it depends on in what circumstance and how, right? Certain activities, certain items become classified as business related or non-business. Therefore, the role of business is of exchanging it with goods and services for value. Okay, so that value concept is very important. Business is the one who creates that value for us. Okay. Fourth is business and economic development. As I told you, economic development is very important for every country, right? If you don't progress economically, then people are not able to earn more, people are not able to get more jobs, people cannot survive and thrive, and you will not be able to grow, right? Therefore, business plays a very major role in the overall development of any economy. The role of business is not limited to economic development but extends to social sectors as well, as it contributes to making good living for people. So we should not construe that business is only there for economic development. It's not only meant for the government to earn. Now, you must have heard concepts like GDP and GNP and countries' growth rate and all of that, right? Now, basically, those are all money value that you are attaching to a country's development. Okay, therefore, we call it economic development. So you must have heard about the government saying that, in the last 5 years, the GDP of India has gone up from 5% to 7.5%. So that is like a measurement metric for you to understand whether your economic development is happening and is it happening at a good rate or not. Okay, so there you are always measuring in terms of money. But we are saying here that the role of business is not only to help the country earn. It is not just to say that GDP has increased, the country is able to earn more revenue, and the country is able to, increase its GDP rate year after year. While that is definitely one of the objectives of business, we can never refuse the fact that businesses also help or has a social aspect to it, right? As human beings, as consumers, as people who are an integral part of the economy, we also have businesses contributing to our social status. They make our lives so much better, right? Earlier, if I was living in a small 1 BHK flat, today, if I'm able to prosper and buy a 2 BHK, or I'm able to afford buying a villa or a bungalow flat, then thanks to businesses, right? Thanks to the way business is flourishing, thanks to the fact that there are real estate developers who are now producing those fancy move-in flats and, which I'm able to buy. So it is satisfying my needs. It's making my life better. So social aspect is also definitely there. Businesses work to identify human needs and match these needs through production and distribution. So business does not just suddenly start manufacturing things and then say, okay, people will come and buy. Their first job is to identify what is it that human beings want. Okay, if the businesses start producing anything that they desire to produce and then try to push it in the market, people will say, what exactly is this? I don't think I really have a need for this. Right? So don't just manufacture anything you want and think that people will come and buy it. Okay, you'll have to first go and conduct a research or a study to understand what is it that people want, and then start giving them that or producing that and distributing. Okay, let's say, for example, music. Okay, I'm sure a lot of you on this meeting will agree with me that music has become an integral part of our lives, right? I'm not saying that you become singers or you become vocalists or you become instrumentalists. No, that's not the idea. Even as a person who might not be able to play music or who might not be singing as a profession, etc., still music is very important to us, right? The minute we step into our cars, we want that radio on, right? We want to keep listening to music on the go, right? You're at home, you're immediately either on YouTube or on Spotify and you're listening to music. Okay, so if you're sitting on your laptop as you're working, you want some music to be buzzing in the background. So music must have become some integral part of our lives, which once started off as those huge two-in-ones or tape recorders, as you must have heard. Okay, I'm not sure you've even heard about it. You don't get to see one these days, right? We started off with the gramophones and all of that. Then it moved on to tape recorders, which became a little more compact. Then we started having Walkman. Okay, I don't know, again, your generation, whether we've really seen a Walkman. Okay, a lot of you may not have, but yes, some of you, must have seen the Walkman, which was used, way back in the 1980s, or I think I would say even in the early part of 1990s, it was still being used, right? So Walkman were much in vogue at that point of time, because it was more like a wireless device that you carry your music around with. So Walkman became popular. Then when laptops and computers and all that started coming in, then it was floppy disks, right, which you had for bringing in your music. You could have your music which was stored in floppy disks. Okay, then later on it moved on to CDs. Okay, then you had DVDs and all of that. Then you slowly started getting them in pen drives, maybe, right? And today you have them at the tip of your finger, right? In just a single mobile app, you just need to click and your entire playlist is playing down there for you. Okay, so things have evolved. Why? Because people asked for it. Okay, people were always listening to music, but then if you have evolved from an era of gramophones to an era where you have it in your mobile phone, at the click of a button, you have your favorite music that's playing, thanks to human beings who asked for it, right? If people said there's any music and I'm happy with it, I don't think we would be here living in an era where you really have Spotify, or you have your, creation of your own playlists and all of that. So it's our needs that led business houses to create these kind of devices and apps for us, which will satisfy our needs. Now, in an era where you are living with music at your fingertip, if there was any business house which came up and said, we manufacture audio CDs, how many of you would go and buy an audio CD? Say, okay, gone is the time of audio CDs. Which world is this business house living in? Who ever buys CDs anymore? I think laptops have even started giving CD drives for us. Who will buy a CD? We say, what kind of business house is this? They've not even done a market research to identify what is it that people want. And because of that, they'll not get any of their CDs sold. So if this is the problem that you are facing today, then it's because human needs were not identified. Right? I'm not saying that CDs have completely gone or you don't get to see them. You do. But the question is, how many of them still prefer to buy a CD as compared to having music at their fingertips? Right? So the volume of that business would have definitely gone down in leaps and bounds. Right? So business activities provide employment and add to the business activity. They add to the business profits, right? So it's all being done and done in good spirit, right? So businesses need to mobilize their resources like money, people, equipment, and through such resource mobilization, it also adds to economic development. Characteristics of business. Okay, what do we understand by the characteristics of business? How is business surviving? All right. Okay, before I go forward from here, I just want one of you to confirm for me, is everything, is the slide visible? It's the slide is on characteristics of business.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay,
Yes,
perfect.
ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you very much. All right, great. Okay, characteristics of business. Uncertainty and risks are a major characteristic that you'll see. In fact, there are a lot of management thinkers, believers who say that business is synonymous with uncertainty and risk. If you have a business, then you have to live with uncertainty. If you've chosen to do a business, then you have to be having a risk taking nature. It is inseparable. Uncertainty and risk are inseparable from businesses. See, the thing is that business is dependent on human nature, human needs. And tell me, at any point in time, are human needs predictable? Are human needs stable over a period of time? Is the same
No,
human
it's
being having
constant.
consistent needs? Tell me.
No, ma'am.
Right,
It's
exactly.
constantly evolving.
Yes, it is constantly changing, right? In fact, okay, let us take a population of 100 people. Okay, let's say in your city, in your district, you're choosing 100 people, and you're going to ask them, okay, what is it that you prefer to have along with your tea in the evening? Okay, let us say among the 20 of them will say, I just have normal biscuits that I buy from the store. There might be another 20 who say, I have only butter cookies. There'll be others who say, I have only breadsticks or whatever. And then you might have, another set of people who say that I have only burgers with it. So for the same need, okay, you want an accompaniment along with your tea, there are so many different kinds of needs that people are portraying to you. right? So among those 100 customers, they have at least 5 or 6 different needs that they are saying that they want along with their tea. Right now, among that, let us say I am a person who says I want to have a burger along with my tea. Now, let's say business houses says, okay, great. Okay, so I've identified this consumer who says that he's going to have a burger with his tea. So therefore, I'm going to conclude that 20% of the population has burger with their tea. So let's start producing burgers on a large scale. But they're going to be for a big shock if they realize that today I had a burger, tomorrow I'm not in the mood to have a burger anymore. I want to have butter cookies for my tea. So when my or one individual's behavior itself is not stable or predictable, look at the kind of population that we are living in, right? Look at the millions of consumers that business is dealing with. And all of these people have unpredictable behavior, unpredictable needs and wants, and they are ever changing. Okay, and businesses have no clue what it's like. Right? So in such situations, obviously they're constantly living under stress, under uncertainty, under the risk of maybe a loss of a certain customer, loss of certain chunk of business, and therefore it's not going to be easy. Right? Therefore, minimizing these uncertainties and risks are one of the priority tasks that businesses will have to do. Okay, they cannot sit back and relax saying that, okay, now I have conducted a market research or a study. I know exactly what businesses or what consumers want, and I will start producing the same from tomorrow. It's not going to be that easy in practice as it is in theory. Right? So you'll have to live with those uncertainties. You'll have to constantly be on a research mode, constantly deciphering the consumer, what does he want, and then how to minimize that risk. Okay, and as a businessman, you will definitely need to have ownership and entrepreneurial skills and traits. You cannot live without it. Okay, so if you don't know what to do as an owner, you don't know what kind of skills you need to have, you cannot multitask, you cannot, or you don't have a mindset to look into different activities at the same time, you are a person who controls and micromanages, sorry, business is not for you. Right? So you need to work in a VUCA environment. VUCA means basically volatile, uncertain, right? Environment. If this is where you're working, then you need to have definitely ownership and entrepreneurial traits that will get you far. Uncertainty and risks. How does it happen? How do you use? Right? Business is definitely dependent on the customer. So business has to anticipate sales and be prepared for such eventualities. Okay, let us say, for example, around a decade ago, we understood that, global warming has taken a serious turn and the world is not the same place that it used to be. It's not so habitable as it used to be maybe a decade ago, and things are changing, right? A lot of our activities are leading to carbon footprint, and we are, destroying the ecosystem that we are living in, and the future generations are going to have a sad place to be in. And therefore, a lot of people said, no, we are going green, right? We are going to take conscious efforts towards, improving the environmental aspects around us. And we are going to ensure that we are not going to damage the environment further. So what happens? People started undertaking research for greener products, greener services, less wastage, lesser non-biodegradable stuff in the process, right? So people started doing that. So what happened, even if you look at in the automobile sector, now you have what is known as, green or electric vehicles have come in, so that there's less pollution, there's less carbon footprint, less fossil fuels that being used. So everybody felt at that stage, okay, let us just launch electric vehicles. And then I think, everybody in the population who is using vehicles, whether it's two-wheelers or four-wheelers, they're all going to shift to electric vehicles. So what did they do? They anticipated that the sales for such electric vehicles are going to jump multifold, and they start manufacturing electric vehicles in large quantities. But then, did they ever think that this also will have some element of risk? Not everybody did, right? Did they even think, okay, I'm selling them electric vehicles. Is our country ready for this? do we have enough electric charging points as compared to maybe petrol pumps or CNG stations and other things around us? Do we have as many electric charging points? If we don't have that, then what happens? What happens to all these people who purchase electric vehicles from us, and they will be stranded in these roads with no charging point, no place to get to, and the same vehicle which they adored at one point will become a burden for them to travel with. Now what? So you have to understand or visualize the entire journey of your business. It is not just in manufacturing that electric vehicle and telling the customer, here you go, take your electric vehicle and save the planet. No. But the point is that, have you considered his journey right from he purchased the vehicle for another 10 years? How is he going to use that vehicle? How is he going to survive off that vehicle? So you have to first of all sell this idea to the government, to others, and ensure that there is enough electric charging points, understand how much the vehicle is going to run at a particular, full charge, how many kilometers it's going to deliver to you and all of that, and ensure that the customer is not stranded. If the customer is unhappy, you have risked a customer. You have lost that customer forever. So then what happened? Businesses understood that this is risky. Right? If I'm going to sell them electric vehicles without telling them where you're going to get the power for your vehicle, then I'm being very foolish. So then what vehicles did? They did further research, right? And then they said, yes, now I think let's choose a middle path. Let's choose hybrid vehicles instead of pure electric. And then they said, all right. So now a consumer will, as far as possible by him, run in the electric mode, and when he is run out of that and he can't find a power station close by, he can switch the mode to fossil fuel, either petrol, diesel, whatever, and he can at least move up to the closest power point where he can sort of charge his vehicle for electricity and then switch on back to the electric mode. So then people felt, yes, this is what we wanted. Right? While we want to save the planet and have an electric vehicle, we also want that comfort, that peace of mind while using that vehicle, that if I run out of power, I have the opportunity to switch on to another mode without being stranded on the street for lack of power. Right? Therefore, uncertainty and risks are always there, but you have to understand how it works. Minimizing such uncertainty and risk, we should understand one thing, that no matter what kind of business, even if you are the Adanis and Ambanis also, we cannot completely eliminate uncertainty and risk. We will still have, right? Why do you think Mr. Ambani is going on launching newer and newer Jio products every now and then? Why is Reliance entering into newer and newer fields every now and then? The idea is very simple, right? You know that if I'm going to stop saying that, okay, now I am the top businessman in the country, I can just sit back and relax. I don't want to enter into any other new field. Very soon, there will be somebody to overtake you. Somebody else will be conducting market research, understanding a different human need that has suddenly come up, and they will enter that market and take away all the business from you. Therefore, I have to constantly be on the roll. I have to constantly look out. What is it that my business is wanting? What is it that I should provide the customer with? How can I give them more than they ask for? Right? And that is why you cannot eliminate risk altogether, but you have to prepare for that risk. You have to try and minimize that risk as much as you can. Okay, so you can do that either by scaling your operations well, so that you can cover up the cost of whatever you are, undertaking or undergoing. The excess that you earn out of this, because when you scale up your operations or start producing and selling on a large scale, what happens? Because of the economies of scale, you tend to earn a better profit, because your overall cost of production will come down. So when that happens, then you can use this excess that you've earned to pump back into your business and grow it further. You can expand more, or you can buy one or two more machines, or you can start one or two more products in your product line, or you can look for one or two more geographical territories where you can sell successfully. right? So you can start using that. You can also look for insurance, right? You can also look for growing in some other area, and that earning will act as a cushion for you, right? That even in the face of uncertainty and risk, I have something else as a support system to fall back on. So if you normally look at, let's say businessmen, if you've seen people who invest in stocks, right? Stocks and shares, you know how it is. It's actually, if you don't have a very calculated and learned approach to that, it's more like gambling, right? So if you are not having a well calculated approach into which stocks to invest, how to go, then you are just gambling your money, right? Putting it into some stock and hoping that it will rise. And if it actually doesn't do well, then you've lost all your money. But if I want to invest in a stock which I think is going to do very well in the future, my calculations say so, I feel so, I've invested a huge amount in that, but you never know about uncertainties, right? So what I do is, when I'm buying this uncertain stock, I will also undertake, or I will go and put some money in, let's say, a fixed deposit. So I know that if on a future date, if my stock doesn't perform so well, and if I'm not able to get that 10% profit or whatever I expected out of it, still I've not lost all my money. The money that I've put into fixed deposit is still earning me interest, right? So I've created that kind of a cushion for me, saying that if one source of money I'm losing, then I'm at least minimizing the gravity of that loss by investing in a stable source of income somewhere else, like a fixed deposit, right? Business has to set the scale of operations by looking at the competition and anticipated sales volumes. Okay, so bigger businesses are able to have bigger and better scale. Obviously, because you're a bigger business, you have more money with you. If you have more money, then you can expand your business further. You can buy more machines. And if you buy more machines, if you're able to hire more people in the job, then you can produce also more units and sell them. Okay, that is called as a bigger and better scale of operations. Yes, need for ownership and entrepreneurial traits. Okay, this is again something that I want you all to be aware of. What is ownership traits? What are entrepreneurial traits? Okay, they're basically nothing but the qualities or the skills that you need to have. Okay, for a business to sustain and grow, you know that we're all living in an era where sustainability is of utmost importance. Right? So businesses just don't want to set themselves up and grow. They're saying we want to sustain ourselves. We want to be there in business for an unforeseeable time, right? They want to grow. They want to take ownership of their work and business. Okay. Now, if you have to take ownership, then basic business decisions like what I have to sell, what I have to produce, what should be the price of my product, what kind of process should I use, a manual process or an automated process in my manufacturing and selling, what kind of research I should do. All these things you should take complete ownership and responsibility for. It is going to be your decision. You are the owner of that business. Okay, again, as I told you, even though you've done all this very meticulously planned up things, the fact is that going forward, you might find that situations are changing. Situations and circumstances are very volatile. They change very fast, and business has to be ready for those changes. Business cannot think that once I have a plan A that is decided and how I want to go ahead and carry out my business, then they cannot sit back and relax saying that I've put my plan in operation. If the situation in the market, the situation in the economy has changed, you have to very quickly be receptive of that. You have to respond to that change. You have to change yourself and adapt to that change. Right? So one of the realities for all of the business owners is that they cannot leave the job. As an employee, if I feel that my job is becoming very difficult for me, I'll say, no, it's not worth it. It's spoiling my peace of mind. I'm going to quit my job and I will look for another job in another company. I can say that because I have been hired. I'm on a job. I'm an employee. But for an owner, it is his baby. That business is his baby. Everything in that business, he is taking care of. Right? He is the one who started that business. So if business becomes tough, Like you or me, he cannot say, no, I want to quit the job and I want to go somewhere else. You can't do that. You cannot leave that job, because it's not even a job. It is your life, right? Therefore, which employees can do, owners cannot do. So it calls for an additional level of courage and risk-taking ability and all of that. Okay, business owners need to have a very high degree of motivation to achieve if they have to go through hurdles of establishing and running a business. Okay, so it's not going to be easy, but then they'll have to struggle and do this, right? Only then will their business be successful. Okay, next we are going to look at a very interesting comparison between business, profession and employment. Okay, how are they different? What happens? Okay, this is what you are going to be studying in this particular aspect. Okay, so what is business? I think fairly we have got an idea by now, right? We'll also take a sneak peek into profession and employment. And once we understand that, then we will be able to compare the very subtle differences between the three of them. Business refers to any organization that provides goods and services to the consumers in exchange for money, right? I'm sure over the previous slides also, this is exactly what we have understood, right? It's any organization that provides goods or services. So if I'm buying a laptop, I'm buying a good. If I'm buying a mattress, I'm buying a good. If I'm buying an almirah for my house, I'm buying a good. But if I'm going to a bank and opening an account, I'm buying the banker's services, right? Similarly, if I'm going to a transportation agency and telling him I want the vehicle to drop me in a particular place, I'm buying their services, right? So you can be buying goods or services, but in exchange for money. There has to be an exchange. Okay, the objective or goal of business is to earn profits. Okay, no business can survive without profits. So profit motive is the primary, what do you say, influencing force or the primary motivational aspect of any business, right? So if I start a business, what will always be on the back of my mind is how profitable is it going to be? When will I start earning profits? How much profit can I earn in a year? So always it is profits which are going to be at the back of my mind. The focus of business is to meet or satisfy needs of society. So their focal area is, of course, profits, but they will be able to earn those profits only if they satisfy needs of the society, right? This is where you can use that CD example which I gave you, right? I cannot say my objective or goal is to earn profits and then keep on producing and selling a product which the public does not want. If people have completely stopped buying CDs, then I cannot keep on manufacturing and pushing CDs to the market saying that people will buy and I will get my profit. It's not going to happen. Okay, so identify their needs, satisfy their needs, and then only you will earn profits. Okay. Some of the characteristics of business is that it's an economic activity. If you remember in the earlier slides, we discussed that activities can be classified as economic and non-economic activities. Non-economic activities are those where there is no money exchange, right? So for example, let us say you've called your friend over for lunch today at your home, right? And you've said, okay, what are the dishes that you like? Let me prepare them and then let's meet over lunch. You come over to my place and then we'll have lunch. We'll have, we'll chit chat for a while and then you can leave. Is it an economic or a non-economic activity? Yeah, anyone? Okay. So,
Non-economic
yes, dear? What did you say?
Non-economic activity.
Yes, absolutely. It's a non-economic activity, right? How often do we call our friends home for lunch and once the lunch is done, do we give them a bill saying that, yes, here you go? No, right? It's a non-paid activity. We're calling it out of friendship. We're doing it out of courtesy. We're doing it out of emotional and, other needs, right, that we have. And therefore, these are just out of pure social needs. They are not economic activities. All right. But business is not friendship. Business is not, just supplying goods to a charitable institution. Business is when goods and services are sold for money, and therefore it is a pure economic activity. Buying and selling happens in business, right? Businesses are involved in buying and selling. Of course, there can be companies which don't produce, okay, or manufacture, but they just buy and sell. We call them traders, right? In the language of commerce, we call them traders, but traders are also businessmen, right? They are involved in buying from the producer and they sell it to us, who are the consumers. All these nearby retail stores you go to, they're all just buying and selling. They don't make any product themselves, but still they are in the business of buying and selling, right? So business provides goods and services to consumers directly or through another company. Again, business is not a one-time task or an activity saying, okay, I started a business today and I'm going to carry out my business for 3 years and then shut it down. No businessman thinks that way. Okay, a businessman, whenever he starts his business at no matter what scale, nearly tiny, small scale, with 4 people in the company, he must have started his business, but he always has a dream that my business should continue forever. My business should continue to prosper, continue to grow to a level that is unthinkable. So business must always be set up, started and carried out with an objective to engage continuously in transactions, which will keep giving you profits. More profits you get, again put it into business, again grow, again you grow further, again more profits come, again expand your company. So this is a cycle that will go on. Therefore, it involves frequent strategizing. Okay, it also has profit motive, right? You know that businesses are always focused on achieving profits by producing and selling goods and services. Okay, it is not social service motive, it is always profit motive. Risks and uncertainties are inherent in all businesses, right? And therefore, business always operates in a very dynamic and unstable environment. Okay, so they have to be prepared for obstacles, challenges, surprises, shocks, threats, any point of time. Okay, business has to be creative and dynamic. If you just keep manufacturing and selling the same products day in and day out, there is no innovation, there is no creativity, you are not trying to improve your product in any way, very soon you will stop earning any profits. All your customers will stop buying from you. They'll say the same product you sold 10 years ago and today also it's exactly the same. Means there is no positive change, right? So for example, at one point of time when you said, okay, now the cold weather has started and I think I have to start buying my sweaters, right? So we used to go and buy a sweater. Very soon pullovers came in the market, so people said, okay, this is a better thing. Okay, then some others felt, okay, there are shawls as well, let us start using shawls, they are more handy, I can take it off whenever and it's very easy for me, it doesn't hamper my current dressing, so I'll go for shawls, right? Then jackets came in, right? And people said, no, I'm going to use jackets because they are good for when on the drive, also it is very good because it keeps me warm, right? And to an extent that today you said, okay, I want to feel warm, but not essentially everybody needs to see what's keeping me warm, so I don't want to wear my sweaters for the public to see. And then you have thermals which came in, right, which you can wear under your clothes as well. So if you are not going to think creative, if you're not going to think of how can I get at better and better and better products, then very soon you are going to be out of the market. Customer satisfaction is extremely important for you. Okay, but I would say people have gone far beyond the concept of customer satisfaction also. Customers have needs. Business is here to satisfy customer needs, that's true. But having said that, you are able to achieve that only if you provide what they want. Okay, satisfied customers begin to patronize you, they become regular customers for you. In such a circumstance, it is important that if you want to get customers, if you want to retain your customers, then just satisfying them is not enough. Therefore, companies and businesses started moving ahead to not customer satisfaction, but to customer delight as a concept. They said, we're not happy if our customers are just satisfied. We want to give them that X factor in the products. Therefore, we are focusing on customer delight. The customer should be more than happy to buy our product. And then now it has moved to customer experience, right? So you're saying, no, customer satisfaction and delight is also not enough. We have to give them an experience. They should be able to survive the experience of our product. They should be able to come back again and again and say, that's the experience that I want when I use a product, right? So customers are the key, or customers are the king, is always the concept. Okay. Social activity, businesses have to be socially responsible. We understand that profit is the motive which you are living by, but that does not mean that you will disregard society, cause harm to the society, continue to pollute rivers. No, you're not going to do that. Okay, you have to understand that society and business are interdependent, and therefore you will perform only those activities which will not harm the society. And yes, businesses are definitely subject to governmental control. Business has to comply with government regulations and work under uncertain, or they'll have to work under certain levels of control. So they have to be prepared for that. They cannot say it's my business, I'll do whatever I want with it. Unfortunately, the government will not let you do that. Okay, the government will always set in a periphery of your working. Legal framework will be there. Within that, you can conduct the activity the way you please. Okay, what you can do now is just take a quick 1 or 2 minute break. Okay, not much, because I think we are all, in our comfort zone already. Just maybe a quick bio break. You want to have a cup of water or whatever, you can do that and quickly get back to the meeting. 2
Thank you,
minutes.
ma'am. Yeah, thank you, ma'am.
Sure.
मैम आपका आवाज नहीं आ रहा है मैम.
Ma'am has given a break for
She has gone.
2 minutes.
She has gone for a break.
मैम आपका आवाज नहीं आ रहा है और कैमरा भी आपका बंद है.
मैडम ब्रेक दिया है 2 मिनट के लिए.
अच्छा, ओके ओके, नो प्रॉब्लम.
Okay, is everyone here? Am I audible now?
Yes, ma'am. You're audible.
Okay, and the slides are visible too?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay,
Yes,
thank
ma'am.
you very much. All right. Okay, so this is where we had stopped. Okay, so continuing from there. Next is profession. What exactly is a profession and how can we differentiate it from a business or from an employment? Okay, according to Cambridge Dictionary, profession is any type of work that needs special training or a particular skill, often that one that is respected because it involves a high level of education. Okay, so this is very important for us to understand that whenever you're in a profession, let's say you, for example, you're a doctor or you're an architect, you're a lawyer, so you actually have some special and formal training, formal education that you undergo, rigorous training, and certain specialized skills you need to have. Only then are you fit for that profession, or you can call yourself a professional in that. And because you have undergone that rigor and you have that specialized knowledge with you, therefore you also demand a special respect in society, and and you have that, you can command that kind of a status. All right, so these are professionals. How does it work for business? How does it work? Characteristics. If you are in a profession, then you have to handle your profession with a great deal of responsibility. Okay, professionals deal in matters of importance which require a great deal of responsibility and obligation. Any carelessness or lack of skills would be very damaging. Okay, so for example, let us say you are an architect. Okay, and you have been asked to draw a blueprint of a particular flyover that is going, planned from to connect two different cities that are across a water body and etc. And let's say you have designed or you've given a very poor design of how a particular water body should be. Let's say you, in your design, you have given that just 4 pillars would be sufficient to handle the whole bridge, while in fact your study says that for every so many kilometers, every 2 kilometers, they have to be at least 4 pillars, etc. That means you are not doing your job with a lot of carefulness, right? So if you are doing your job carelessly, then you are basically not considering it important. You are misusing, or rather I would say you are not being responsible enough. This could lead to a lot of difficulty. What if that bridge collapses when people are using it? Who is going to be responsible for all the casualties and the deaths that occurred during that? Therefore, it is important that as a professional, you are going to construct it in absolutely a professional manner with a lot of meticulous calculation about the material that would be used for it, the number of pillars that would be set up to hold that bridge, and the kind of capacity, the weight capacity that it can handle, and all of that. So, all that is your responsibility. Similarly, accountability. You have to be accountable for your quality of work. So if you are the architect in that, if the bridge falls off after 2 uses or on the day of the inaugural, you cannot wash your hands off that issue and say, not my job. I did not know how did it fall off. You should say, yes, completely my responsibility. I'm sure I did some miscalculation. If that bridge fell off, my responsibility. Right? So you cannot treat that job very easily. That is why you are so respected, na? Because it's a matter of life and death. It's a matter of how you can be responsible for a certain task. It's based on specialized knowledge. Professionals provide services based on knowledge and skills that are specific to professions. Okay, so each skill, each profession has a separate body of knowledge which specializes them in that skill. Right? So, for example, a doctor will do an MBBS with maybe a house surgeoncy plus maybe some specialization. So, by the time he's finished 5 or 8 years of education, that's when he calls himself as an MD, a doctor, right? Saying that, okay, now I am compatible to conduct, let us say, surgeries on these kind of patients, and I have enough in and out knowledge of this particular thing. Similarly, for a lawyer or an advocate, unless he has undergone a thorough study of all the legal aspects of civil or criminal or whatever specialization he has chosen, he cannot go and advocate for his customers or clients the way he should. right? He might go and, you know, unnecessarily punish an innocent person, or because he didn't know how to argue for his client, he might be, you know, unnecessarily crucifying somebody who is innocent in a case, right? Again, matter of life and death. Okay, so you have to be very careful and ensure that each profession has their specialized knowledge which they are able to study and deliver. Okay? Institutional training. Okay, people acquire or they sort of gain their high level of practical experience before they are recognized as professionals. Okay, you must have heard about CAs who undergo an articleship. You must have heard about a lot of other, let's say, doctors, etc., who undergo internships right before they become resident doctors, and then they become, you know, surgeons and all that in the future. But you have to undergo that rigor. Okay, you have to have a lot of high level practical experience before you can call yourselves that now I can independently handle this particular role. Okay, the learning is continuous and ongoing for professional development. Again, you cannot sit back and say that, okay, now I'm a good surgeon, I know how to conduct surgeries, I'm the best cardiac surgeon in the city, now I can sit back and relax, I don't need to update myself anymore. Wrong. You still need to update, because now surgeries are also becoming maybe different, right? The way they can be conducted, there are changes in the procedures. Nowadays, people are going for minimal invasion surgeries, so you need to learn that up. Now people are going, or, you know, they've started using robots to conduct surgeries, so you need to understand how the program works, how the, you know, or what is the level of accuracy with which robots are working on, you know, on humans as far as surgery is concerned. So you have to constantly be abreast with what is happening in the market. Okay, profession may or may not require formal education and formal qualification or certification. Autonomy. Professionals have ultimate responsibility for their work, right? In a company, if you do something wrong, right, you're sitting in a chair and then you mess up with some numbers, you can always say, okay, my team leader will tell me that I did something wrong, I'll correct it. If team leader does something wrong, he'll say, okay, my manager will identify it, my manager told me, I will correct myself. But if you're a professional, and if you do something wrong, you don't have any other shoulder to rest on, right? You have the ultimate responsibility for your work. So if you messed up something in an argument for a client, or, you know, in the financial statements for a particular company, then it's completely your responsibility. Right? You must have noticed that in a lot of companies, let's say, for example, in the Videocon, the Chanda Kochar case and all of that, when they did come up and they found out about the huge fraud that happened there, or the millions of rupees that was actually embezzled from there, it was not just Chanda Kochar who lost her job, or, you know, it was not just, the company itself which was doomed. The first thing they said is, okay, who were their auditors? Come on, pull up PwC. Right? If their financials were actually so messed up, then why did the chartered accountant not pull it up? So as a professional, he was supposed to have the ultimate responsibility of pinpointing if anything was wrong with the accounts or the financial statements presented by the company. But if they didn't, then it's not just ICICI that's going to have a problem, but I also have to have, let us say, the auditors of that company also, who are equally responsible, right? So they were also pulled up. So professionals cannot escape their responsibility. Focus on building clients rather than customers. Okay, professionals should build their, because see, customers can come and go. Today I'm interested in buying product A, tomorrow I'm buying product B. But if I'm a client, I want to have repeat business with the same person if they have served me well, if they're giving me good quality, if they are maintaining the level of their services, I will choose and patronize them. Okay, so you should always focus on building clients rather than just one-time customers. Direct working relationship with clients. Yes, professionals habitually work directly with your clients. They don't go through an intermediary, right? So as I told you, if you are doing the blueprint for a particular customer who says, I want to construct a villa in my plot, and he hires an architect, then as an architect, I'm directly going to get in touch with my client, with that person, telling, okay, how many rooms do you want? Okay, how many people are going to live in this house? What all do you want in this particular area? Do you want large, more compound and garden area, or do you want more livable carpet space? What is it that you're looking for? So I'm working directly with my client rather than through anybody else. Ethical constraints are definitely there, because, you know, as you see, For example, as they say, the doctors always take the Hippocratic oath, right? Saying that whatever happens, saving the life of the customer is the utmost, is my ultimate responsibility. So you have your core values, which you are not going to give up at all. Okay. Similarly, ethics, professions are always merit based. Professionals achieve their employment and success based on merit. Okay. So once you perform your profession well, then by word of mouth and by other publicity, people will get to know about you. Then people will give you more business. So based on how well you or how good you are at your profession, accordingly, based on your merits, more people will come and give you more work. That is how your success builds. Morality is very important. Professional moral foundation flows from a recognition of a singular right of an individual to his own life, along with all sorts of inherent and potential sovereign value. So you should never forget that you are a professional, and while you have responsibility for a task, morality is equally important. Right? Every individual to himself. So that moral base, moral foundation should always be there, and you should never forget and give up that particular aspect when you are working with anybody, any client. Of course, employment is the third aspect we're touching upon. Employment means having the state of having a job, right? I'm sure a lot of you here may be in employment. Okay, I'm not sure how many of you here are businessmen, but I'm assuming most of you are employed or having an employment. Okay, if some of you are professionals, great, there again. Okay, but in terms of economics, employment means a state of having a job or being employed. Means basically there should be an employer-employee relationship. Somebody who gives you a job and somebody you are working for. That is what is an employment. The aim of an employee is accepting an employment to earn money. Qualification, whatever minimum qualification is required for a job, usually is informed through you through an advertisement or any other means. And if you possess those educational and experiential skills, then you can apply for a job. The company can select you. Communication skill is very important, irrespective of what kind of job you're doing. Okay, earlier people used to believe that only if I'm in, let us say in the press, or if I'm working for an advertising job, then only communication needs to be good. Today, gone is the time of that thought. Whatever profession you are in, communication skills are very, very relevant. Communication skills have to be at your best. Okay, so a good communication skill is also required, so that with your co-workers, with your bosses, with your subordinates, with everybody, you will be able to work with utmost rigor. Okay, and you will be able to maintain good rapport and relationship with them. Okay, passionate I've put in here as 0.5, so I'm not going to explain it here. Creativity, yes, for employment also, employees must be creative. They must always come up with new and better ideas. They should be organized. See, if you've noticed, if you are in a job, and whenever there are company meetings, or the company is in a dilemma, company is facing a new kind of a challenge or a hurdle, and they call upon employee meetings, and they say, okay, company, we are in this kind of a crisis, we are having this kind of a challenge. So anybody has any ideas how we can deal with it? So you can make the most of your presence felt if you have creative ideas with you, right? You will be the first one to pounce to the opportunity and say, yes, sir, I think we can do this. Whether it is workable or not, the fact that you have thought about a creative idea and you have presented it to the management is enough for you to be remembered now amongst the others in the meeting. So it's not enough for you to just mediocrely complete your job. You must be creative on your job as well. Be passionate. Employees who are passionate about the jobs are people who will not look at the clock when they are sitting in the office. Right? They are people who will say, I start the job, I enjoy my job, and when I finish the job, I leave. Of course, you are efficient as well, and therefore you'll finish within the required hours. I'm not saying that you become workaholics. Okay, but I'm saying if you're passionate, you will love doing what you do, and you'll not look at it as a task to be completed, but you will enjoy the work that you're doing. Okay, comparison, I've just put up a table. This you can read when you are free. Okay, once you get the PPTs. I'm not going to go through all this. In a nutshell, we have already discussed, right? What is profession, business, and employment. That is enough. Another major aspect you'll have to know is what is administration and management. Again, these two terms we tend to use interchangeably. Okay, I'm not going to read through everything that's written here. That you can do when you get your slides. I'm just going to broadly explain for you what is what. Okay, see, why I say these terms are important for you to understand is sometimes we use them without knowing what exactly they are. Okay, for example, if you're doing, let us say, a BBA degree, right? We'll say you're doing a business administration degree. Some colleges offer a BBM, saying it's a business management degree, which means maybe they're teaching one and the same thing, but they're using these terms interchangeably. Is it correct? Is it the right way to use it? It's definitely not. That is why we are trying to understand the difference. Okay, administration always is higher than the management. Okay, why do we say this? When I'm the administration of an institution, let us say, for example, you are studying in a college, okay, or in a university. So the university chancellor, the university vice chancellor or pros chancellor, the university registrar, these are your administration people, which means they are basically going to design the vision and mission. Where should the or university portray itself? How will our university stand out among other universities in the same state, city, or country? How can we grow and project ourselves in a different or in a very unique way compared to this? This is all what administration is thinking about. And once their aim is clear, once what to do is clear, then they define the guidelines for that. They give the code of conduct. They define the mission. They define other things which the management will do. Right. So, for example, let us say the directors of institutions, the faculty within the institutions, the various clubs and committees that you find in the colleges. These are all entrusted with management. So you will be executing the tasks, you will be planning how to reach the goal, what we should do to achieve that particular mission or vision of the administration, how to execute, let us say, a given fest or a given activity or a given function in the college. How do we do that? Right? Or let us say foundation day of your company is coming up and you are made in charge of conducting this function. So you are managing it. Right? The person who gave you that task and is overall going to supervise and give you the guidelines, that person is in the administration. You are just managing, you are carrying out that task. Right? You can have teams of people to help you out with that. That is different. But still, you are in the management. Okay? Did you understand the broad difference? So, management deals with overall business system. Right? It deals with both business and administration. Management is present inside and also outside of your organization. It strives profitability, liquidity, efficiency, effectiveness, right? So everything you are thinking about the overall picture. Focus area of management is development and growth of business. Administration, on the other hand, is about unit of operation of business. It's focused only on administration. Okay, it's within the organization. Focus areas of administration are efficiency and effectiveness. This is why I said they are looking at a big, large scale. Okay, bird's eye view. How should my university or how should the entire organization be, carrying out their function efficiently? How can I ensure that I am having my jobs conducted with minimal number of people? How can I ensure that with only so much raw material, still I'm able to achieve more output, efficiency? This is all what my administration thinks about. But at the management level, production manager will think only about production. Sales manager is thinking only about sales. Marketing manager only about marketing. Right? So you are thinking about smaller things. Right? Thrust area of administration are command and control. That is why they deliver the guidelines. They give you code of conduct. They tell you how to drive your overall action. That is what administration does. See, policy decisions are also outside their purview. Okay, this is again just in a nutshell trying to give you, at a glance, differences between administration and management. Objectives, businesses broadly have two objectives. Okay, economic objectives and social objectives. Economic is everything to do with the economic activity, basically the money aspect, profit aspect. Social objectives are those which are to do with society, you and me, human beings. Okay, that's softer aspect. Okay, they are to do with social activity. As business, it's about customers and the society. Business has a social aspect and has a moral responsibility towards society. Economic objectives could be profit earning, obviously, because businesses are formulated with profit motive only. So profit earning is their primary purpose why they are in business. Market share creation or creation of customers, yes, again, very important, because if I want to continue earning profits, I cannot believe that today I have 100 customers, they will continue buying from me throughout, the next 100 years. No, it's not going to happen. Right? So as Peter Drucker said, there is only one valid definition of business purpose, and it is to create customers. So throughout their lifetime, businesses should go on creating customers, make more and more customers, and then make them loyal customers. That is how they can grow. Innovation and utilization of resources. Yes, as a business, you must ensure that you are constantly on the lookout to innovate, to create something new. Okay, and use your resources in the best possible manner. Increasing your productivity can also be one of your economic objectives, that today if I am able to produce only 100 units, then I want to increase my production to, let us say, 120 units. But does this mean I have to get more machinery, more people, or can I just increase the capacity of what I'm working? So let us say today I'm able to produce 100 units because I'm working only at 80% capacity. My people are only working in 1 8-hour shift. But if I'm able to accommodate 2 8-hour shifts on the same day, then my production will be doubled. Okay, if anyone is talking, can you please mute yourself? Okay, so you have to always try to achieve higher productivity with the same resources by minimizing your wastage and making proper use of available resources. Social objectives are plenty. Okay, I'm not going to read all of them, but then I'll give you a look and feel of the whole thing. Obviously, you have to provide good quality products and services to people. Ultimate responsibility of what you supply to the society is yours. So ensure that you are taking care of all your stakeholders, not just your customers, but also your vendors, your employees, and everybody. Right? You are all interdependent. So you have to take care of everybody in society. Okay, you must act as a responsible corporate citizen towards the nation. Pay your taxes on time. Ensure that the government is not defrauded. Ensure that you are, leading to or providing more resources and revenue for greater GDP. Okay, you're trying to balance between profits and social cost, which means you're not trying to achieve your profits by damaging society or putting society in hardship. Okay, you must also follow all rules and regulations, law and code of conduct. Okay, you must ensure that as a business, you must participate in all the societal activities and contribute for overall social good. You must have heard about CSR activities being undertaken by businesses, which are nothing but corporate social responsibility. Right? So sometimes you undertake activities where employees of a company go to rural areas and they teach maybe computer literacy, etc., to maybe children or adults even in those rural areas. So that is like giving back to society. That is also part of your social responsibility. Not to mention that one of the major social objectives is also to provide good employment opportunities for people. And those who are employed with you, pay them proper or adequate compensation for the kind of jobs that they are doing. Okay, adequate pay packages should be given to them. Yes, risks are another inherent part of business. As I told you, just like uncertainties are, risks are also plenty in business. You must ensure that while you cannot eliminate all kinds of risks, you must at least try to minimize these risks as far as possible. So causes of business risk can be broadly classified into 4 parts. Okay, natural risks, economic, human, and physical. Okay, natural risks are those which are caused by natural factors which you and me don't have any control over. Right? So basically they are like earthquakes, floods, famines, natural disasters. Right? These also can cause losses to business, unforeseen and sudden. Right? They are. Economic, related to economic phenomena. Let us say competitor has come up with a new product, or competitor has changed his price policy. Right now, or consumer has changed his preference. These things can lead to economic risks. Okay, human risks, which are caused basically because of human factors. right? Maybe your employees were careless and therefore quality suffered a setback. People are not buying your product anymore. Human factor causing risk. Again, physical factors. Okay, physical factors could be maybe like a change in the technology or your machinery, which suddenly, or over a period of usage got old, worn out, and now you need to, replace that machinery, and that comes with lakhs of rupees of cost. So all these are also some of the risks that you undergo. While you cannot completely eliminate the risks, you have to try and strategize how you can mitigate or how you can minimize the effect of that risk. Okay, so you can avoid getting into risky transactions where you know that something is risky. It may or may not give you profits, and the amount of investment it is asking you on that is huge. Not worth taking that risk, don't do it. Okay, so avoid entering into highly risky transactions. Use risk prevention methods. For example, if you are, let us say, dealing in highly flammable products, let us say oil or cotton, right? You can quickly catch flame. So try and install a fire alarm system in your organization. Have enough firefighting equipment that are placed, easily reachable destination. This you can do to prevent the risk of fire. Similarly, transfer the risk. If it is possible, if you can't handle the risk, it is too much, it is too expensive, buy an insurance policy. Okay, through that, what is happening is if that risk actually does happen, then you can call the insurance company and say you satisfy the risk. You pay up for that risk because it happened. Like risk of theft and all people are undertaking these days. Let's say you are a jeweler, right? And you're working with diamonds and costly, expensive, jewelry. Okay, like platinum and all of that. And you know that it's a huge risky business you are into. So you can take a theft insurance for your company, right? Saying that if at all there is a theft or a burglary that happens at my store when I'm not there, let us say wee hours of the night when the store is shut down, but somebody breaks into it and steals something, insurance company will try and satisfy that. Okay, share the risk with other businesses by agreeing to share or compensate losses. Okay, so you can form conglomerates and say, okay, today I have, we together let's try and sort out our risks, or let us not put all our eggs in one basket. Let us try and diversify so that we are able to bear the risk in an easy manner. Okay, small quizzes for self-learning. This you can do once you get the PPT. If you have understood everything that has been explained so far, this should be easy for you. Okay, so I'm not touching upon this right now. Let's go to module 2 and quickly study what are the types of businesses. This should not take much time based on my understanding. So let's see how we can complete this aspect. Objectives. Okay, or basically what are the session objectives? By the end of the session, you should be able to understand basically how you are able to, gain an insight into mechanics of trade and commerce, or how you will be able to gain some skills and knowledge into business and management. What is an organization? Okay, in this particular module, you're studying all about business entities and organizations, right? So an organization is an entity, like a company. It can be any other form also, right? An association that consists of one or more persons. It has a specific purpose. Mostly it is a profit motive, right, for which they work. It's a group of people who work together for common objective. Like growth can be an objective, market leadership can be an objective, a profit can be an objective, right? Organization can also is also an act of forming or establishing something like an organization. So organization is not just a noun, right, in which it means a company, etc. Organization also means to organize something. It is a verb as well. Types of organizations, broadly there are 5 types of organizations, or based on structure they can be line organizations, line and staff or matrix. Tell me. Okay. Line organization structure is what you normally find like in the military organizations and all, okay, where completely there is a very strict line of authority, and whatever the superior says, subordinate has to follow, autocratic leadership. Okay, staff organization refers to an organization where people are advising each other, suggesting each other measures, and you help out each other. That's a staff kind of an organization. Normal organizations are usually a combination of line and staff. Okay, that you see in companies, for example, where on the one hand they do give you an organization structure saying that who is above whom, who is below whom. For example, first you have team leader, then you have project manager, then you have let us say the functional manager, then you have the VP, then you have the president. So that is a line structure. But alongside that, you also have advisory functions, like you have HR and you have the accounting functions. These are all staff functions, which also help the line, right? So these are the normal kinds of structures. And then metrics organization structures are those where you don't have a strict line of authority, and you might have one person who is reporting to two different heads, or you can have one particular person who is giving guidelines to two different teams. So it's all kinds, it's not a single streamlined approach. Mostly the kind of project teams that you see these days are all metrics structures, right? Where I might be a shared resource between two projects. So I'm reporting to project manager A also, I'm reporting to project manager B also. Okay, similarly, project manager A is not just managing project A, he's got another project X also. So for him, he is managing some subordinates over here, he's managing other subordinates in project X also. So that way it's a metrics organization. Okay, then you also have, based on operations, formal organizations are those where the air of authority is very strict and formal. Informal are mostly the kind of organizations you see today, where the rapport and the air, or the communication between people is rather informal, and you don't have strictly demarcated operation or functional areas. Metrics organizations are kind of like this. The project teams that you see are mostly based on operations, right? So they all come together for a particular project. After that project is completed and delivered to the customer, then they break apart. Then some people go into some other project, another group goes and joins another project. Okay, again, all the virtual teams that you see today, okay, thanks to all the work from home and remote working that's happening today, there are all virtual teams. So if I'm a project manager, I can have a team member of mine working in my city. I can have one who is working, let us say, in Mumbai or in Chennai or in Allahabad, and I can have maybe one team member of mine who's working from Australia. I'm still a team, right? It's a virtual team. Based on ownership, they can be sole proprietary organizations, which means there's just a single person. Sole proprietor means a single person who is owning and managing businesses. But so entire burden of loss is on him. Entire profits can be enjoyed by him. The entire brain behind the business is his. A lot of responsibility he needs. Of course, he can employ others to help him out in the tasks. Partnership requires at least two people. Okay, maximum can be 10 or 20 people based on the kind of partnership. They have a mutually understanding relationship. They come together by agreement. They share mutual responsibility amongst themselves. Collectively, they take decisions for the firm in the best interest of the partnership firm. Private and public limited companies are company forms of organizations, right? Private limited basically to do with organizations which are close-knit, don't have much reporting to the government or to the general public. They are not dependent on the general public for raising their funds. They go to the banks, they obtain funds from them, or they can have a good set of, let's say, institutional investors or foreign investors who might invest in them, and that's all. And then they conduct their businesses in a private manner, and their profits they enjoy, they distribute, they do whatever. We normally don't know about what they do. Okay, public limited companies are those which have share capital and all of that. We can buy shares in their company. We are invited into their meetings. We can understand what kind of progress is happening in their companies, right? So those are public limited companies, and because they are working with the public money, like you and me who are buying shares in their company, the government has given them very strict guidelines. They have to publish their audited financial statements at the end of each year. Okay, so their transparency should be very huge. Okay, HUF is nothing but Hindu Undivided Family. So these are more like family businesses, right, which are run by different members of the same family. By birth, you become a member of the HUF, and the oldest member of the HUF is known as the Karta. Okay, and he is the one who takes the major responsibility, and all decision making for the HUF is done by him. Cooperatives are a form of organization wherein different kinds of people come together in a cooperative spirit. Okay, cooperative spirit means it's you come together with no clear-cut senior, junior, or reporting kind of pattern amongst you. You are all equals, right? And it you come together. If you're conducting a business, then you everybody pulls in money. If there's profit, everybody shares in that. So it's like, no one person has a major domination, or nobody is suppressed. Okay, so it's basically a form of an organization where it's each for all and all for each kind of a an organization. So it's usually not profit oriented. Like you must have heard even about housing cooperative societies or producers cooperatives, credit cooperatives. So basically it's a group of like interest or like minded people who come together and form these cooperatives, and because you have similar interests in minds, you pitch in and you try and help each other. Basically that's the idea of cooperatives. Okay, nowadays you have cooperative banks and all that also, right? Based on investment, you have large scale and small scale organizations. There's also, if I may add on, medium scale organizations, and now you also have MSMEs, micro in organizations also. Okay, large scale simply means that you are investing lots of money, producing several goods on a very large scale, and you have a huge customer base. Small scale, on the other hand, means that you are investing small sums of money. Your business is happening at a rather small level. Maybe you have very few customers, but yes, not that you will not grow in the future. You might grow in the coming, future as well. Okay, based on the nature of activity, your primary, secondary, and tertiary organizations. Primary organizations are those which deal with primary activities. Primary means anything to do directly with the earth. Okay, so it could be agriculture, right? Land is given, right? It's nature's gift to us. So we can just grow something on the land, primary activity. Okay, similarly, you could be working in the mining industry. What are you doing in mining? You are extracting again something from the land. You can be working in the field of oil industry. Again, what are you doing? You're extracting oil from the land. Okay, so all these are primary activities where you are completely dependent on nature, what nature is giving you. Okay, then you have secondary. Most of the businesses that you see around you will be in the secondary sector, which means manufacturing, buying, and selling. So all these automobile sector or furniture sector or housing sector, all these are secondary sectors, because it all has to do with making something, creating something out of what is available around, right? And then tertiary sector. Tertiary sector refers to those sectors which actually help out the primary and secondary sectors. Okay, so whether it is transportation or insurance or banking and advertising, and all of these help out the primary and secondary sectors, right? And therefore they are called tertiary sector. So I hope in a nutshell you've understood what are the different types of organizations that we are hinting at. Okay, entities and their relevance. Why are they relevant to us? They are created by one or more individuals basically to perform functions of business, right? And therefore they have a separate legal entity. Entity is nothing but an organization. And why do we call them an entity? Because we sort of claim that they are different from the owner itself. They have a separate identity. Entity comes from the word identity. Therefore, separate identity or existence is given to these businesses. They refer to structures of the business rather than what the business does. Okay, each business entity has its own advantages, like limited liability. Some of them have disadvantages also, like high level of bureaucracy might be there, non-transparency can be there, right? So business entity concept, economic entity concept, these are all, see, if you notice, there is an entity concept over there, which speaks about businesses being considered as a separate identity. Okay, entity types. The different types of entities are small businesses, cooperative societies, private and public sector, multinational. I think some of these we touched upon, so I'm not going to explain them again and again to you. Okay, so I'm going to only touch upon those factors which we have not already studied. Okay. why is business entity concept important? Obviously, it's important because all parameters, whether you're measuring a business's success through its profitability or solvency or cash flow, it's all measured for the business. Okay, again, whenever you record transactions, you're buying something. Let's say you're buying a furniture or you're buying a piece of land, you're buying it in the name of the business. Right, so that is why that entity of the business is very important. Again, when tax is calculated and paid, it is paid in the name of the business, not in the name of the owner of that business, right? So therefore, entity concept can be extremely important. Okay, these are the small businesses, okay, that I was telling you about. Sole propriety and partnership are usually very small businesses. They don't tend to scale up much. Okay, and the owners are responsible for all the kind of actions that are taken in these kind of businesses. Cooperative societies, again, as I told you, they are more like self-help groups. As I told you, each for all and all for each kind of functionality. So in a cooperative society, everybody is treated equal. Okay, one person has one vote. So any decision making has to happen. Everybody's decision or everybody's opinions are taken into consideration in an equal fashion. Okay, they are formed not for profit. Okay, they are not formed for profit. But it's wrong to say that cooperative societies do not make profit. Their motive is not profit, but when they engage in activities, they can make a profit. But when they make this profit, they don't really distribute it out to everybody. They invest it back into their society functions, and then that's how they continue to work. Okay, then private and public sectors, again, where I told you, you could have private sector may you have all the sole proprietorship and partnership, joint stock companies. Public sector consists of those which are partly or fully owned by the government. Okay, now don't confuse a public company with a public sector organization. Okay, public companies are joint stock companies that you will find in the private sector. Public limited companies, if you remember, I just discussed them with you in an earlier slide. Private limited companies and public limited companies, both of them are in the private sector, which means they are started by individuals like you and me, right? Whether if I'm running my business with transparency and with funds which are accumulated from everybody in the public, then I'm a public limited company. If I'm working with my own funds or somebody I've borrowed from the bank, etc., I'm a private limited company. But still, both of them are in the private sector. Public sector means it's a sector that is owned and operated by the government. Okay, at least more than 51% of those operations are owned and managed by the government. It can be central government or state government, or partly by central, partly by state government. But basically, the accountability, the ownership, the autonomy, everything is of the government over here. In 1991, you're all aware that we had the LPG policy, the liberalization, privatization, globalization policy that we underwent. And during this time, there was a lot of disinvestment also that was seen. A lot of erstwhile public sector companies started getting shifted into the private sector. Okay, the government said we are releasing them. Okay, we are not able to take care of all these organizations in the public sector. We are disinvesting, which means we're taking our investment out of it, making it less than 50% or 40%, 30%, whatever, and we want the private to come and take it over. So we all from the private sector, individuals, businessmen, and all could go and invest into these kind of organizations. And now the entire ownership and management was given to private sector. So this was a major change that was witnessed in the 1991 policy. And once the public sector was opened out for investment, we found a lot of foreign investment also flowing into the country. Right? And when foreigners came in and they started doing business, then a new concept emerged of multinational enterprises. Okay, and in the Indian economy as well as outside, we have what is known as multinational companies. What exactly are these? Okay, joint stock companies, I've already told you what they are. Okay, they are basically companies which are, they are separate entities, but they are, they have a separate identity of their own. Their number of members are different. Their shares can be freely transferred from one shareholder to another. The Companies Act is the basic guideline or is the basic, Bible for them to follow for joint stock companies. Okay, and multinational enterprises, as I told you, these are corporations, very large corporations which have been set up. They might have one particular country of registration. So, for example, Infosys, right? Infosys is registered under the Indian Companies Act, but Infosys also has a place of operation in the US. Therefore, we call Infosys as an Indian MNC or Indian multinational corporation because it is registered in India, but it has a place of business outside India. Similarly, if you look at, let us say, McDonald's, or if you look at Accenture, right? We'll say, okay, these are companies which are registered back in the US, right? So, and they have a place of business in India. They're coming here and they're conducting business. So we call them MNCs, right? So that's how MNCs function. Okay, these are global enterprises, global footprint. They operate in multiple geographical areas and they produce and sell multiple products as well. Their aim is to spread the operations all over the world rather than focus on just maximizing profits. Their aim is to keep on expanding their operations, reach maximum countries as they can, right? So, see, they have, of course, large amount of capital resources at their disposal. That is why they are called MNCs, correct? Marketing strategies can be very unique, very aggressive marketing they undertake so that they can have larger reach, try and create newer customers, create global brands. Okay, marketing territory expansion is their major lookout. Okay, and centralized control, no matter where all they go globally, they will have one centralized headquarters which will try and control the operations globally about, in every part of the world. Okay, so through this session, I hope you've understood, how trade and commerce is organized, what kind of activities happen in business, how can you clearly differentiate between, let us say, economic and non-economic activities, or even between different kinds of business organizations. How can you differentiate between business, profession, and employment? All of these factors is what we have studied today. Okay, so that's it from me. Okay, if you do have any doubts now at this point, I'm more than happy to take it over. Yeah, students, do you have any doubts?
No, ma'am, it's
Great. If there is any point you feel that, I'm either going too fast or you feel there's something you didn't understand, please feel